The rain fell in sheets, turning the neon signs of the warehouse district into bleeding watercolors on the slick, black asphalt. Elian huddled deeper into the alley, the damp chill seeping through his thin jacket, a miserable counterpoint to the fire in his gut. This was the place. The scent of ozone, rot, and something wilder, something powerfully alpha, clung to the air, a potent cocktail that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He wasn't here for shelter. He was here to hunt. For months, his entire existence had been pared down to this single objective: find the rogue alpha, Kale. The brute who had broken from the Directorate's leash, the one man who could lead Elian to the monsters who had taken everything from him. Information brokers whispered Kale's name in hushed, fearful tones. They called him a feral beast, a killer. To Elian, he was just a key. A heavy footstep echoed from the mouth of the alley. Elian's breath hitched. He pressed himself into the shadows, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The scent blockers he'd applied were starting to fail, the cloying sweetness of his own manufactured omega pheromones thinning, revealing the dangerous truth beneath: the scent of winter frost and old silver. He had to be quick. The figure that emerged was a silhouette of raw power, broad-shouldered and impossibly tall, moving with a predator's lethal grace. Rain slicked back his dark hair and traced the hard lines of his face. Kale. The scent hit Elian like a physical blow, pine after a lightning strike, scorched earth, and the unshakable arrogance of a dominant alpha. It was intoxicating and terrifying. It was the scent of everything he was meant to destroy. I know you're there. Kale's voice was a low growl, vibrating through the narrow space. The reek of a Directorate Synod Omega is hard to miss. They sent a pup to do their dirty work. Elian remained silent, forcing his breathing to even out. His hand tightened on the silver knife hidden in his sleeve, a weapon of last resort. His body was the true weapon. Kale took another step, his eyes, dark and piercing, scanning the shadows. Come out. Let's make this quick. I don't enjoy killing your kind, but you leave me no choice. Elian's plan had been simple. Get close, use the element of surprise, disable him, and extract the information. But the sheer force of Kale's presence threw that plan into chaos. This wasn't just an alpha, he was a force of nature. Elian's instincts screamed at him, a cacophony of fear and something else, something ancient and hungry that he fought to suppress. He stepped out of the darkness, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. He kept his head bowed, playing the part of the terrified Omega he was supposed to be. Small, non-threatening. Pray, I'm not here to fight you, he whispered, his voice trembling convincingly. Kale scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound. Then you're a fool. The Directorate doesn't send messengers. He closed the distance in 2 silent strides, grabbing Elian by the front of his jacket and slamming him against the wet brick wall. The impact knocked the air from Elian's lungs. Kale's face was inches from his scent a suffocating cloud. Who sent you? What do they want? Kale demanded, his grip like iron. Elian's vision swam. The proximity was overwhelming. The Alpha's raw power ignited the curse in his blood, the silver fire that he kept banked and hidden. It wanted out. It wanted to feed. No, he thought desperately, not yet. Not like this. His carefully constructed mask was cracking. He could feel the change beginning, a cold shimmer under his skin. He had one chance. One desperate, insane gamble. They want you dead, Elian choked out, and then he lunged. Not with the knife, but with his teeth. He twisted in Kale's grip, his movements unnaturally fast, and sank his teeth into the juncture of the Alpha's neck and shoulder. A roar of shock and pain ripped from Kale's throat. It wasn't just a bite. As Elian's teeth broke the skin, a torrent of cold, silver energy poured from him into the Alpha. It was a claiming, a branding, an Omega marking an Alpha. It was an abomination, a violation of every natural law their kind lived by. He felt the bond snap into place, a searing, incandescent chain linking his soul to this monster's. Kale staggered back, clutching his neck, his eyes wide with disbelief and agony. Blood, dark in the dim light, welled between his fingers. But worse than the pain was the sudden, undeniable connection. He could feel the boy's terror, his rage, his bone-deep sorrow, all crashing into him like a tidal wave. He stared at Elian, who was now slumped against the wall, panting, his eyes glowing with a faint, ethereal silver light. The sweet omega scent was gone, replaced by something wild and ancient. The smell of moonlight on frozen metal, of a winter storm that promised death. This was no omega. This was something else entirely. Something wrong. Cale's world tilted on its axis. The directorate, his exile, the bounty on his head, all of it faded into the background, eclipsed by the impossible reality of the burning mark on his neck and the creature who had put it there. The bond thrummed between them, a two-way conduit of emotion and instinct. He felt a primal, gut-wrenching urge to protect the very being who had just attacked him, an instinct so strong it almost brought him to his knees. What are you?" Cale snarled, the words a mix of fury and dawning horror. Elian pushed himself off the wall, his slender frame trembling with the effort of what he'd done. The silver light in his eyes receded, leaving them pale and haunted. "Your problem," he breathed, before his legs gave out and he collapsed onto the wet pavement. Rage warred with the possessive, protective instinct flooding his system. Cale looked down at the unconscious boy, then at the blood on his hand. He should kill him, end this unnatural connection before it could take root. But the bond was already there, a hook in his soul. He couldn't leave him. He couldn't kill him. With a curse that echoed off the brick walls, Cale scooped the boy's limp body into his arms. The contact sent a jolt through him, a sense of rightness that was utterly insane. He was light, deceptively so. Carrying him was effortless. Cale retreated into the labyrinthine depths of the city, the strange, silver-scented creature in his arms a puzzle he had to solve. He brought him to a safe house, a derelict sub-level apartment he kept for emergencies. He laid Elian on the single cot, the boy's face pale and still in the dim glow of a single utility light. Cale paced the small room like a caged animal, his hand repeatedly going to the bite mark on his neck. It wasn't healing. Alpha wounds healed in minutes, but this felt different. It burned with a cold fire, a permanent seal. He could feel the boy's life force, a faint, flickering ember tied to his own roaring fire. He felt the echo of his pain, a deep, cavernous grief that made Cale's own cynical heart ache in sympathy. This was the bond's doing. It forced an intimacy he didn't want, a vulnerability he couldn't afford. Hours passed. Elian stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Cale was across the room in an instant, looming over the cot. Elian's eyes opened, silver and wary. He flinched, trying to scramble back, but his body was weak. "Stay still," Cale commanded, his voice rough. "You have a lot to explain." Elian stared at him, his gaze flicking to the mark on Cale's neck, now a complex, swirling pattern of silver scar tissue against his tanned skin. "There's nothing to explain," Elian said, his voice raspy. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Cale's laugh was a bark of disbelief. "You branded me. You violated the most fundamental law of our nature. That is not a mistake. That's an act of war. So tell me who you are, and why I can feel your miserable, shivering soul inside my head." The boy, Elian, Cale now knew his name. The bond had whispered it to him, pushed himself into a sitting position. The defiance in his posture was at odds with his fragile appearance. "My name is Elian, and I did what I had to do to survive. Survive me." Cale leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think this makes you safer? I am bound to you, yes. But that bond goes both ways. I can find you anywhere. I can feel what you feel. And if I choose, I can use it to crush you." The threat hung in the air, but Elian didn't flinch. Instead, a flicker of dark irony touched his lips. "Go ahead. Try." The challenge infuriated Cale. He reached out, his hand wrapping around Elian's throat, not to choke, but to hold, to dominate. His thumb pressed against the frantic pulse there. He felt Elian's fear through the bond, sharp and cold, but beneath it was a bedrock of resolve. He wasn't just afraid, he was waiting, as if daring Cale to unleash something. Cale's instincts, honed by years of survival, screamed a warning. He released his grip, stepping back. "Every alpha in a 100-mile radius will feel this mark on me. They will hunt us both. You haven't just trapped me, you've painted a target on yourself." "I've had a target on me since the day I was born." Elian shot back, his voice raw. "The Directorate, they destroyed my family. I need you to find the man responsible. The pack leader. Alistair." The name landed like a stone in the pit of Cale's stomach. Alistair, the sanctimonious, cruel alpha who led the Directorate. The man who had framed Cale, branding him a traitor and forcing him into a life on the run. Their enemies were the same. Alistair, Cale repeated, the name tasting like ash. Why him? He presided over the execution of my parents. He called them aberrations. He ordered them cleansed. Elian's voice broke, the grief he'd been suppressing finally cracking the surface. The bond transmitted the emotion directly to Cale, a wave of agony, so profound it stole his breath. He saw flashes, images not his own, a silver-haired woman, a man with kind eyes, fire, and the cold, triumphant face of Alistair. He stumbled back, pressing a hand to his temple. What was that? The bond, Elian said, his expression grim. It shares more than just feelings. This changed everything. This wasn't just some Directorate assassin. This was a survivor, someone with a vendetta as deep and as personal as his own. And this unnatural bond, it could be a weapon, a direct line into each other's strengths and memories. What are you, Elian? Cale asked again, his tone no longer threatening, but laced with a tense, urgent curiosity. No Omega could do what you did. Your scent, it's a lie. Elian hugged his knees to his chest, making himself small. I am what Alistair fears most. My family were lunar wraiths. We look like wolves. We can pass as Omegas, but we are other. We are born of moonlight and shadow. An alpha's power is like food to us. And a mark from us, it doesn't just claim. It leeches. Cale felt a cold dread snake down his spine. Leech. He could feel it now, a subtle, constant drain on his power, flowing through the bond to Elian. It was why the boy was recovering so quickly, drawing strength from Cale's alpha core. He had been marked by a parasite. A beautiful, tragic, silver-eyed parasite. So you're using me as a battery, Cale stated, the words flat. I'm using you to get my revenge, Elian corrected, his silver eyes flashing. And you're using me to clear your name. The bond makes us partners, whether we like it or not. We share an enemy. That's all that matters. For days, they existed in a tense truce within the confines of the small apartment. The bond was a constant presence, an invisible current flowing between them. Cale found himself instinctively aware of Elian's moods, the sharp edges of his anger, the deep, quiet pools of his sorrow. When Elian slept, Cale was plagued by nightmares of fire and silver blood. He brought Elian food, and through the bond felt the boy's surprise and suspicion at the simple act of care. One evening, Elian was staring out the grimy window at the sliver of moon visible between the towering skyscrapers. The moonlight seemed to cling to him, making his pale skin luminous. It makes you stronger, doesn't it? Cale asked, his voice quiet. Elian nodded without turning. It's what I'm made of. Alistair's purge happened during a new moon, when we were at our weakest. He's meticulous. He's a monster, Cale agreed. He stepped closer, drawn by an impulse he didn't understand. He could smell the true scent on Elian now, the cold, clean fragrance of moonlight and winter. It no longer felt wrong, merely different. Alien. The bond hummed with a strange resonance, a feeling that bordered on contentment. We need a plan, Cale said, forcing his mind back to the practical. Alistair is holding his annual Ascension Gala in 3 days. Security will be absolute, but he'll be there, exposed. It's our best chance. Elian finally turned from the window. In the dim light, Cale could see the exhaustion etched onto his face. The constant drain on Cale's energy was a pittance for an alpha of his strength, but the act of creating the bond had taken a massive toll on Elian. I can get us in, Elian said. My manufactured Omega scent can be persuasive, especially to alphas who think with their instincts. And once we're in, I just need to get close to him. Elian's voice was cold steel. My touch is poison to him, to his line. It's why he fears us. A protective instinct, raw and unwelcome, surged through Cale. He'll kill you before you get within 5 feet of him. Not if his attention is on you, Elian countered, his silver eyes locking with Cale's. You're the notorious rogue, the traitor returned. You will be the distraction. I will be the knife in the dark. The plan was suicidal, but it was all they had. The night of the gala arrived, cloaked in a tense, electric silence. Elian, dressed in a simple but elegant black suit, looked less like an assassin and more like a ghost. He had reapplied his scent blockers, burying the silver frost under a veneer of sweet submission. Kale, dressed in a borrowed suit that strained across his shoulders, felt like a bull in a china shop. The bond between them was a taut wire, thrumming with anticipation and fear. Elian's fear. Kale could feel it, and the urge to wrap the boy in his arms and spirit him away from this place was almost overpowering. They slipped into the opulent tower through a service entrance, Elian's presence calming the low-level Alpha guards with a subtle pheromonal push. They moved through the shadowed corridors, the muffled sounds of music and laughter growing louder. They reached the ballroom, a cavern of crystal and gold, filled with the most powerful shifters in the city. And on a raised dais, holding court, was Alistair. He was handsome, charismatic, his power a palpable force in the room. Kale felt a fresh wave of hatred. He met Elian's eyes across the crowded floor. Now, Kale stepped out of the shadows. A gasp rippled through the crowd as he was recognized. The music faltered. Guards started to move. Alistair. Kale's voice boomed, cutting through the silence. Your little exile is over. Alistair's charming smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned to ice. Kale, I should have known you didn't have the good sense to die quietly. As every eye in the room fixed on Kale, Elian began to move. He slipped through the throng of stunned guests, a shadow gliding toward the dais. The bond was a beacon, guiding him. He could feel Kale's controlled rage, his readiness for a fight, and he drew on that strength. He was almost there, just a few more feet. But then a guard, a hulking alpha, turned and saw him. His eyes widened in confusion. Hey, you're not supposed to. Before he could finish, Kale exploded into motion. He launched himself not at Alistair, but at the guards converging on him, creating the final diversion Elian needed. In the chaos, Elian leaped onto the dais. Alistair spun around, his eyes finally landing on Elian. For a moment, there was no recognition. Then, his senses caught the faint trace of silver beneath the omega scent. His face contorted in a mask of pure terror and rage. You, he hissed. An abomination. I killed you all. You missed one. Elian whispered, his hand outstretched. His fingertips began to glow with a soft, silver light. Alistair lunged, but he was too late. Elian's glowing fingers brushed against the back of his hand. Alistair screamed, a horrific, tearing sound as the silver energy coursed into him. It wasn't a quick poison. It was an unraveling, severing his connection to his alpha power, burning it out from the inside. He collapsed, writhing on the ground, his power fizzling out like a dying star. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Kale, having dispatched the guards, fought his way to the dais. He grabbed Elian, pulling him back from the whimpering form of Alistair. It's done. Elian gasped, leaning heavily against Kale. The effort had drained him completely. Sirens wailed in the distance. We have to go, Kale said, sweeping Elian into his arms. He didn't hesitate. He smashed through a plate glass window, landing on a balcony below and disappearing into the night. They found refuge in the skeletal remains of an old church on the city's edge. Kale laid Elian down near the shattered stained glass window, where a single beam of moonlight cut through the darkness. The silver light seemed to soothe Elian, his breathing evening out. Kale looked down at the man in his arms, the lunar wraith who had marked him, saved him, and tied their fates together with a silver thread. The bond between them was no longer a source of conflict. It was quiet, a calm, steady hum of shared existence. He could feel Elian's exhaustion, but also his relief. The crushing weight of his vengeance was gone, leaving a hollow space behind. What now? Elian asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kale sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. The simple contact felt grounding. Now, we figure out what this is, he said, gesturing between them. Alistair is broken, but the Directorate will hunt us. We're both rogues now, both monsters in their eyes. Elian looked at the mark on Kale's neck, the silver scar that glowed faintly in the moonlight. I'm sorry, he said, the words heavy with a sincerity that surprised Kale. I tied you to my fate without your consent. Kale followed his gaze, touching the mark. It no longer burned. It felt like a part of him. You did, he admitted. He looked at Elian, whose silver eyes held the reflection of the fractured moon. But I'm starting to think my fate is better with you in it. A fragile hope flickered through the bond, warming him from the inside out. Elian's lips curved into a small, tentative smile. In the ruins of the old world, under the light of the moon, something new and wild and utterly impossible was just beginning.